The alarm clock buzzed at 5:30 in the morning, just like it had for the past 8 years. Robert rolled over and hit the snooze button, allowing himself just 5 more minutes of rest before starting another day. His small apartment was quiet, except for the gentle hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen. Through the thin walls, he could hear his neighbor's television already playing the morning news. At 52 years old, Robert had learned to appreciate the simple things in life. His job as a security guard at Riverside Mall wasn't glamorous, and it certainly didn't pay well, but it was steady work. More importantly, it gave him a sense of purpose that he'd come to cherish over the years. By 6:15, he was dressed in his crisp security uniform, the navy blue shirt tucked neatly into his pants. He looked at himself in the bathroom mirror and straightened his name badge. His hair had more gray in it than it did when he first started this job, but his eyes still held the same warmth and determination they always had. Before leaving, Robert quietly opened the door to the second bedroom. His daughter, Lisa, was still asleep, her textbooks scattered across her desk from studying late into the night. She was in her second year at the community college, working toward her dream of becoming a nurse. Robert smiled softly and closed the door without making a sound. Everything he did, every extra shift he picked up, every dollar he saved, it was all for her. The bus ride to the mall took 40 minutes. Robert used this time to watch the city wake up around him. He saw other workers heading to their jobs, parents walking their children to school, and shop owners opening their stores. He greeted the regular passengers with a nod and a smile, recognizing faces he'd seen hundreds of times over the years. When Robert arrived at Riverside Mall, the sun was just beginning to rise. The massive building stood quiet and empty, a stark contrast to the chaos it would become in just a few hours. He loved this peaceful time of day, before the crowds arrived and the noise began. "Morning, Robert," called out Vincent, the janitor who worked the early shift. They'd become good friends over the years, often sharing coffee and conversation before the mall opened. "Morning, Vincent. How's your grandson doing?" Robert asked, genuinely interested. "Growing like a weed. He'll be taller than me by next summer," Vincent replied with a proud grin. This was who Robert was. He didn't just see people as faces passing by. He remembered their stories, their families, their struggles, and their joys. To him, every person who walked through those mall doors mattered. At 7 sharp, Robert took his position near the main entrance. The first stores began to open, and employees trickled in for their shifts. He greeted each one personally. "Hey, Robert, thanks again for helping me jump my car last week," said Tom from the electronics store. "Anytime, Tom. That battery still holding up okay?" Robert asked. "Perfect. I owe you one." But Robert never kept score. He helped because it was the right thing to do, not because he expected anything in return. As the morning progressed, the mall slowly filled with shoppers. Robert watched them all with a careful but friendly eye. Most security guards just looked for troublemakers, but Robert looked for people who needed help. He spotted an elderly man looking confused near the directory. Robert walked over immediately. "Can I help you find something, sir?" The man seemed relieved. "I'm looking for the pharmacy, but these mall maps always confuse me." "No problem at all. It's on the second floor, west wing. I'm heading that way anyway. Let me show you." Robert walked with the man, making small talk and moving at a comfortable pace. When they reached the pharmacy, the elderly gentleman thanked him warmly. "You're very kind, young man. Not many people take the time anymore." Robert smiled. "It's no trouble at all. You have a good day now." These small interactions filled Robert's days. He helped a young mother struggling with a stroller and shopping bags. He found a lost little boy and stayed with him, keeping him calm and entertained until his frantic parents were located. He assisted a teenager who was looking for a job, pointing him toward stores that were hiring and even putting in a good word with a few managers. During his lunch break, Robert usually sat on a bench in the food court eating the sandwich he'd packed from home. He couldn't afford to buy lunch every day, not with Lisa's tuition and their rent to pay. But he didn't mind. He watched people, enjoying their meals, families laughing together, friends catching up over coffee. It made him happy to see people enjoying themselves. One afternoon, a teenage girl approached him nervously. She worked at the clothing store and had mentioned to Robert a few weeks ago that she was being bothered by a customer who made inappropriate comments. "Robert, he's back," she whispered, looking scared. Without hesitation, Robert stood up. "Show me where." He handled the situation professionally and firmly, making it clear that the man's behavior was unacceptable and that he needed to leave. The girl thanked him with tears in her eyes. "You always look out for us," she said. "That's my job," Robert replied gently. "But more than that, it's just what people should do for each other." By the time his shift ended at 6 p.m., Robert's feet ached and his back was sore. He'd walked miles through the mall, climbed countless stairs, and stood for hours. But his heart felt full. He'd helped dozens of people today, even if most of them were small gestures that they'd probably forget by tomorrow. On the bus ride home, Robert calculated his finances in his head like he did every evening. After rent, utilities, groceries, and Lisa's tuition payment, there would be just enough left over. Maybe he could pick up an extra shift this weekend to build up their savings a little more. When he got home, Lisa was at the kitchen table, studying anatomy. "Hey, Dad, how was work?" "Same as always, sweetheart." "Good day. How about you? How was class?" They talked while Robert made dinner. Nothing fancy, just pasta and sauce, but they ate together and shared their days. These moments were what Robert lived for. Later that night, after Lisa had gone to bed, Robert sat in his worn armchair and thought about his life. He didn't have much money. He didn't drive a nice car or live in a big house. But he had his daughter, his health, and a job where he could make a difference, even in small ways. He had no idea that tomorrow would bring an encounter that would change everything. For now, he was simply grateful for another day, another chance to be kind, another opportunity to help someone who needed it. That was enough for Robert. It had always been enough. Tuesday started like any other day at the mall. Robert had his morning coffee with Vincent, checked in with the store managers, and took his usual position near the main entrance. The weather forecast called for rain, and by noon, dark clouds had rolled in over the city. Robert watched through the glass doors as the first drops began to fall. Within minutes, it turned into a downpour. Shoppers rushed inside, shaking off their umbrellas and laughing about the sudden storm. Robert helped a few people, offering directions to the nearest restroom where they could dry off. That's when he noticed her. An elderly woman sat in a motorized wheelchair just outside the covered entrance, getting soaked by the rain. She seemed to be struggling with something, her hands moving frantically over the controls. Robert didn't hesitate. He grabbed his jacket and rushed outside. "Ma'am, are you all right?" he called out over the sound of the rain. The woman looked up at him, her gray hair plastered to her face, rainwater streaming down her jacket. "My chair," she said, frustration clear in her voice. "It just stopped working. I can't get it to move." "Let me help you," Robert said immediately. He moved behind her wheelchair and began pushing it toward the entrance. The chair was heavier than he expected, and the wheels fought against him on the wet pavement, but he managed to get her inside and out of the rain. Once they were under the shelter of the mall entrance, Robert grabbed some paper towels from a nearby dispenser. "Here, let me help you dry off a bit." The woman accepted the towels gratefully, dabbing at her face and hair. "Thank you so much. I don't know what happened. One minute I was fine, and the next nothing worked." Robert knelt down to examine the wheelchair. He wasn't a mechanic, but he'd learned a thing or two over the years from helping people with various problems. After a moment, he spotted the issue. A wire had come loose from its connection, probably jostled free by the bumpy parking lot. "I think I see the problem," he said. "Do you mind if I try something?" "Please, go ahead." Robert carefully reconnected the wire and pressed the power button. Nothing happened. He checked the battery indicator and saw it was completely dead. "Looks like your battery died too," he explained gently. "This wire coming loose probably drained it faster than usual." The woman sighed heavily. "Of course it did. I have errands to run, and my son won't be able to pick me up until 5 o'clock. That's 4 hours from now." Robert looked at his watch. His lunch break was starting in 10 minutes. He made a decision without even thinking twice about it. "Tell you what," he said with a warm smile. "I'm about to go on my lunch break. Why don't I push you around the mall? You can get your errands done, and when you're finished, we'll make sure you're comfortable until your son arrives." The woman looked surprised. "Oh, I couldn't ask you to do that. You must have other things to do." "I don't have anything more important than helping someone who needs it," Robert said honestly. "Besides, I'd feel terrible leaving you stuck here." "What's your name, if you don't mind me asking?" "Catherine," she replied, her eyes softening. "And you are?" "Robert." "Nice to meet you, Catherine. Now where do you need to go first?" Catherine directed him to the pharmacy first. As Robert pushed her wheelchair through the mall, they talked. She told him about her late husband, who had been a businessman. She mentioned how lonely life had become since he passed away 3 years ago. "My son is wonderful, but he's busy with his own family and career," Catherine explained. "I try not to bother him too much." "I'm sure he doesn't see it as a bother," Robert said kindly. "But I understand. Everyone wants to feel independent." They stopped at the pharmacy where Catherine picked up her medications. Then Robert pushed her to the bank where she needed to deposit a check. At each stop, people passed by without giving them a second glance. Everyone was caught up in their own world, their own problems, their own schedules. Robert didn't mind. He wasn't doing this for recognition. He was doing it because Catherine needed help, and he had the time and ability to provide it. As they made their way through the mall, Catherine asked Robert about his life. He found himself opening up to her in a way he rarely did with strangers. Maybe it was her warm, grandmotherly manner, or maybe it was just that she seemed genuinely interested. "I have a daughter," Robert shared. "Lisa. She's studying to be a nurse at the community college. She's the light of my life, honestly. Everything I do is for her." "She's lucky to have a father like you," Catherine said softly. Robert smiled. "I'm the lucky one." "She's worked so hard. Maintains a perfect grade point average while working part-time at a coffee shop. I just wish I could do more for her, you know? Take away the stress of student loans and let her focus completely on her studies. Money troubles?" Catherine asked gently. Robert felt a bit embarrassed but answered honestly. "We manage. It's tight sometimes, but we get by. I pick up extra shifts when I can. I just want her to have the opportunities I never had." By this time, it was well past Robert's official lunch break, but he didn't mention it. Catherine still had one more errand at the bookstore, and he was determined to help her complete it. At the bookstore, Catherine selected a novel and a magazine. When they got to the checkout counter, she reached for her purse and her face went pale. "Oh no," she whispered. "My wallet. I must have left it at home." Robert saw the distress in her eyes. Without thinking, he pulled out his own wallet. "Don't worry about it. Let me get this for you." "Absolutely not," Catherine protested. "You've already done so much." "Please," Robert insisted. "It would make me happy to do this. Consider it a gift from one friend to another." Catherine's eyes welled up with tears. "You barely know me, and you've given up your lunch break, pushed me all over this mall, and now you want to pay for my things." "Why?" Robert shrugged simply. "Because you needed help. That's all the reason I need." He paid for her books and they made their way to the food court. By now, Robert's stomach was growling. He'd brought a sandwich from home, but it wasn't much. "Are you hungry?" Catherine asked. "Let me at least buy you lunch. I can pay you back for the books and lunch when my son gets here." "I've got my lunch right here," Robert said, patting his bag. Catherine looked at his small paper bag and then at the food court options around them. "Nonsense. After everything you've done, the least I can do is buy you a proper meal. Please, I insist." Robert was about to protest when his stomach growled loudly, betraying him. They both laughed. "Okay," he relented. "But only if you join me. I hate eating alone." They sat together in the food court, sharing a meal and continuing their conversation. Catherine asked more questions about his life, about Lisa's dreams, about his own hopes and challenges. She listened intently, asking thoughtful follow-up questions that showed she genuinely cared about his answers. "You're a good man, Robert," Catherine said at one point. "The world needs more people like you." Robert felt his cheeks warm with embarrassment. "I'm just doing what anyone should do." "But they don't," Catherine said firmly. "I sat outside in the rain for 10 minutes before you came. Do you know how many people walked past me? At least 50? You were the only one who stopped." Robert hadn't thought about it that way. He'd simply seen someone who needed help and acted on instinct. They talked for over an hour. Catherine shared stories about her life, her travels, her career in real estate before retirement. Robert found himself genuinely enjoying her company. There was something special about her, a wisdom and kindness that drew him in. When Catherine's son finally arrived at 5 o'clock, she introduced Robert to him and explained everything he'd done. Her son thanked Robert profusely and tried to give him money as a thank you, but Robert refused. "Your mother's company was payment enough," Robert said sincerely. As they prepared to leave, Catherine took Robert's hand in both of hers. "Thank you, Robert. You've restored my faith in humanity today. I won't forget your kindness." "It was my pleasure, Catherine. You take care of yourself." Robert watched them leave, her son pushing the wheelchair toward the exit. Catherine turned back once and waved, a bright smile on her face. Robert returned to his post, his supervisor giving him a look that said he'd noticed the extended lunch break. But Robert didn't care. He'd done the right thing, and that mattered more than any reprimand. He had no way of knowing that this afternoon would change his entire life. For now, he was just glad he'd been able to help someone in need. That was always enough for Robert. It had always been enough. 3 weeks passed since Robert had helped Catherine at the mall. Life continued as it always had. He woke up early, took the bus to work, helped people throughout his shift, and came home to make dinner with Lisa. The memory of that rainy afternoon remained warm in his heart, but he didn't dwell on it. To him, it had just been another day of doing what felt right. On a Thursday morning, Robert was standing near the jewelry store, chatting with the owner about her new grandchild, when his supervisor approached him with an unusual expression on his face. "Robert, there's something for you at the security office," his supervisor said, holding a large manila envelope. It came by certified mail. Had to sign for it and everything. Robert felt his stomach tighten. Certified mail was rarely good news. His mind immediately jumped to worst-case scenarios. Was it something about their apartment? Had Lisa gotten into some kind of trouble? Was it a medical bill he'd forgotten about? "What is it?" Robert asked, his voice uncertain. "Don't know. It's addressed to you personally, care of the mall, from some law firm downtown." His supervisor handed him the envelope, curiosity evident in his eyes. Robert's hands trembled slightly as he took the envelope. The return address showed the name of a law firm he'd never heard of, Morrison, Burke & Associates. The envelope felt heavy, substantial. Whatever was inside, it was official. "You okay, Robert?" his supervisor asked, noticing his pale face. "Yeah, I just need a minute," Robert said quietly. He walked to the break room, his heart pounding with each step. Vincent was there, pouring himself a coffee. "You look like you've seen a ghost," Vincent observed. "What's wrong?" "I don't know yet," Robert replied, sitting down heavily in one of the plastic chairs. He stared at the envelope for a long moment before finally opening it. Inside was a formal letter on expensive-looking paper. Robert began to read, his eyes moving slowly across each line. "Dear Mr. Robert Hayes," it began. "We regret to inform you of the passing of Mrs. Catherine Ann Mitchell on October 3rd. Mrs. Mitchell passed peacefully in her sleep at her home, surrounded by family." Robert's breath caught in his throat. Catherine, the kind woman he'd helped just 3 weeks ago. His eyes began to blur with tears. "What is it?" Vincent asked, concerned. "A woman I helped a few weeks ago. She passed away," Robert said softly, wiping his eyes. "I only knew her for a few hours, but she was special." Vincent placed a comforting hand on Robert's shoulder. "I'm sorry, man." Robert continued reading through his grief. The next paragraph made him sit up straight. "Mrs. Mitchell left specific instructions in her will regarding you. As executor of her estate, I am writing to request your presence at our offices on Monday, October 28th at 10 a.m. to discuss a matter concerning her final wishes. Please bring a valid form of identification. This matter requires your immediate attention." Robert read the paragraph 3 more times, trying to understand what it meant. Why would Catherine mention him in her will? They'd spent just one afternoon together. It didn't make any sense. "What does it say?" Vincent asked. "I don't know exactly," Robert replied, his voice confused. "They want me to come to their office on Monday." "Something about her will." Vincent's eyes widened. "Her will? You think she left you something?" "I can't imagine what or why. I barely knew her," Robert said, shaking his head. "Maybe she wanted to leave me a thank you note or something. I don't know." For the rest of his shift, Robert couldn't focus properly. His mind kept drifting back to Catherine, to their conversation in the food court. to the way she'd held his hand and thanked him. He felt the loss deeply, even though he'd only known her briefly. There had been something genuine about her, something real and kind that had touched his heart. That evening, Robert showed the letter to Lisa over dinner. "Dad, this is crazy," Lisa said, reading the letter for the third time. "Do you think she left you money or something?" "I doubt it, sweetheart. Maybe a small token of appreciation, but I'm not expecting anything. I'm just sad that she's gone. She was a lovely person." "You have to go on Monday, though." "You have to find out," Lisa insisted. "I'll have to ask for the morning off, but yeah, I'll go," Robert agreed. The weekend dragged by slowly. Robert tried to distract himself with his usual routines, but his mind kept wandering. He thought about all the possibilities. Maybe Catherine had left him a book, or a small amount of money to thank him for lunch. He told himself not to hope for too much. Life had taught him that good things rarely came without a catch. On Sunday night, Robert could barely sleep. He lay in bed staring at the ceiling, wondering what tomorrow would bring. Part of him was nervous, part excited, and part still just sad about Catherine's passing. Monday morning arrived with gray skies that matched Robert's anxious mood. He put on his best clothes, a simple button-down shirt and the dress pants he usually saved for special occasions. They were a bit worn, but they were clean and presentable. Lisa made him breakfast, something she rarely had time to do with her busy schedule. "For good luck," she said, placing a plate of eggs and toast in front of him. "Thanks, honey. I'm probably getting worked up over nothing." "Maybe," Lisa said with a smile, "but maybe not. Either way, I'm proud of you, Dad. You helped someone because it was the right thing to do. That matters more than whatever happens today." Her words steadied him. She was right. He'd helped Catherine because she needed help, not because he expected anything in return. The law firm was in a tall building downtown, the kind of place Robert rarely had reason to visit. The lobby was all marble and glass with expensive-looking artwork on the walls. He felt out of place in his old clothes, surrounded by people in expensive suits carrying leather briefcases. He took the elevator to the 14th floor, his heart beating faster with each floor they passed. The elevator doors opened to a reception area that looked like something from a movie. Everything was polished and perfect. "Can I help you?" the receptionist asked with a professional smile. "I have an appointment at 10. Robert Hayes, with Mr. Morrison, I think." She checked her computer and nodded. "Yes, Mr. Hayes, please have a seat. Someone will be with you shortly." Robert sat in one of the leather chairs in the waiting area, feeling more nervous by the second. He picked up a magazine but couldn't focus on the words. His hands were sweating and he kept wiping them on his pants. 10 minutes later, a man in his 50s wearing an immaculate suit appeared in the doorway. "Mr. Hayes? I'm David Morrison. Thank you for coming. Please follow me." Robert stood and followed him down a hallway lined with offices. They entered a large conference room with a long wooden table and chairs that probably cost more than Robert made in a month. "Please, sit down," Mr. Morrison said, gesturing to a chair. He placed a thick file folder on the table and sat across from Robert. "Mr. Hayes, first let me say that Mrs. Mitchell spoke very highly of you. Before we discuss the specifics of why you're here, I need to verify your identity. Do you have your driver's license or another form of ID?" Robert handed over his license, which Mr. Morrison examined carefully before making a copy and returning it. "Thank you," the lawyer said. "Now, I'm sure you're wondering why Mrs. Mitchell mentioned you in her will." "Yes, sir. I only met her once for a few hours. I'm confused about all this." Mr. Morrison smiled slightly. "Mrs. Mitchell was a remarkable woman. She was very wealthy, Mr. Hayes. She built a successful real estate business over 40 years and had no children of her own. In her later years, she became interested in identifying people who showed genuine kindness without expecting anything in return." Robert listened, his confusion growing. "The day you met her wasn't an accident," Mr. Morrison continued. "Mrs. Mitchell deliberately stopped her wheelchair outside the mall to see if anyone would help." "You were the only person who did." Robert's mouth fell open. "You mean she tested me?" "In a manner of speaking, yes. But it wasn't cruel, Mr. Hayes. It was her way of finding truly good people in a world where kindness has become rare. She wanted to reward genuine compassion." Mr. Morrison opened the folder and pulled out several documents. "Mrs. Mitchell has left you something, Mr. Hayes. Something substantial." Robert's heart was pounding so hard he could hear it in his ears. "What do you mean?" The lawyer looked him straight in the eye and said words that would change everything. She's left you $250,000. The room seemed to spin. Robert gripped the edge of the table, sure he'd misheard. I'm sorry, what? $250,000, Mr. Morrison repeated clearly, along with a fully paid house in the Riverside neighborhood, and a college fund that will cover your daughter's remaining education, including graduate school if she chooses to pursue it. Robert couldn't breathe, couldn't think, couldn't process what he was hearing. This had to be a mistake. Things like this didn't happen to people like him. I don't understand, he whispered, tears streaming down his face. Robert sat in the conference room, unable to speak. The tears kept coming, and he didn't bother to wipe them away. Mr. Morrison quietly pushed a box of tissues across the table and waited patiently, allowing Robert the time he needed to process this impossible news. I don't understand, Robert finally managed to say, his voice breaking. Why would she do this? I just helped her for a few hours. Anyone would have done the same thing. Mr. Morrison shook his head gently. That's where you're wrong, Mr. Hayes. Anyone could have helped her, but only you did. Mrs. Mitchell sat outside that mall entrance for nearly 15 minutes before you arrived. She counted 53 people who walked past her. Some looked at her and kept walking. Others pretended not to see her at all. You were the only one who stopped. Robert remembered that rainy afternoon. He hadn't thought about it. He'd just seen someone who needed help and acted on instinct. But that's just basic human decency, Robert protested. I didn't do anything special. That's exactly what makes you special, Mr. Morrison replied. You don't see your kindness as remarkable. It's simply who you are. Mrs. Mitchell recognized that immediately. During your conversation in the food court, she learned about your daughter, your struggles, your dreams. She saw a good man working hard to provide for his family, never complaining, always helping others despite having so little himself. Mr. Morrison pulled out more documents from the folder. Mrs. Mitchell left detailed instructions. She wanted me to explain everything to you personally. She also left you this. He handed Robert a sealed envelope with his name written in elegant handwriting. Robert's hands shook as he opened it. Inside was a letter, dated just 2 days before Catherine passed away. Dear Robert, the letter began. If you're reading this, then I've moved on from this world. Please don't be too sad. I lived a long, full life, and meeting you in my final weeks brought me more joy than you could possibly know. I want to tell you why I've done what I've done. After my husband died 3 years ago, I felt lost. We'd built a successful business together, made more money than we could ever spend, but we never had children. I started to wonder what the point of it all was. What was I supposed to do with everything we'd built? Then I had an idea. I would find people who embodied the kind of goodness my husband and I always valued. People who helped others not for recognition or reward, but simply because it was right. I started testing people, watching how they behaved when they thought no one important was watching. I tested dozens of people over 2 years, Robert. I staged situations where I needed help. I watched and waited. Do you know how many people actually stopped to help me? Truly help me the way you did? 3 people in 2 years. 3 out of hundreds. You were the last person I tested, and you were different from the others. You didn't just help me complete my errands. You gave me your time, your attention, your genuine care. You bought me books with money you clearly couldn't afford to spare. You listened to my stories like they mattered. You treated me like I was someone important, not just an old woman in a wheelchair. And when I asked about your life, I heard the love in your voice when you spoke about your daughter. I heard the quiet dignity in how you described your struggles. You never once complained or asked for pity. You were simply grateful for what you had. That's when I knew. You were exactly the kind of person who deserved a chance to live without the constant worry of money. To give your daughter the education she deserves. To have security and peace. Please accept this gift, Robert. Not as payment for your kindness, but as a recognition of who you are. Use it to build a better life for you and Lisa. You've earned this through years of being a good man, not just through one rainy afternoon. With deep gratitude and affection, Catherine. Robert read the letter 3 times, tears blurring the words. He thought about all the times he'd helped people, never expecting anything in return. All the extra shifts he'd worked, the sacrifices he'd made. He'd done it all because it was the right thing to do, not because he hoped for a reward. She was testing people, Robert asked quietly. Yes, Mr. Morrison confirmed. She wanted to find genuinely good people. She left similar gifts to 2 other individuals over the past 2 years. But your gift is the largest because, in her words, You needed it most and deserved it most. Mr. Morrison spread several documents across the table. This is the deed to the house. It's a 3-bedroom home in the Riverside neighborhood, fully paid for. No mortgage, no liens. The property taxes are prepaid for the next 5 years. This document here establishes the education fund for your daughter. It contains enough to cover her remaining undergraduate courses, plus graduate school if she chooses to pursue it, plus a living stipend so she can focus on studies instead of working part-time. Robert stared at the documents, still unable to fully comprehend what was happening. And this, Mr. Morrison continued, pulling out a bank statement, shows the account that has been established in your name with $250,000. The money is yours to use as you see fit. Mrs. Mitchell put no restrictions on it. She trusted you to use it wisely. I need to call my daughter, Robert said suddenly, reaching for his phone with trembling hands. Of course, take all the time you need, Mr. Morrison said, standing and stepping out of the conference room to give Robert privacy. Robert dialed Lisa's number. She answered on the second ring, clearly waiting anxiously by her phone. Dad? What happened? Are you okay? Lisa, Robert said, his voice choked with emotion. Honey, I don't know how to tell you this. I don't even know if I'm dreaming right now. Dad, you're scaring me. What's going on? That woman I helped, Catherine. She left us money, Lisa, a lot of money, and a house. And she paid for the rest of your college. All of it. Graduate school too, if you want. There was silence on the other end. Then Lisa's voice, small and confused. What? Dad, I don't understand. I don't either, sweetheart. But it's real. The lawyer is showing me all the documents. We have a house, Lisa, a real house. And you don't have to worry about student loans anymore. You can quit your job at the coffee shop and just focus on becoming the best nurse you can be. He heard his daughter start to cry. Dad, this can't be real. Things like this don't happen to people like us. I thought the same thing, Robert said, laughing and crying at the same time. But it is real, honey. It's really real. They talked for a few more minutes before Robert hung up and called Mr. Morrison back into the room. The lawyer spent the next hour walking Robert through all the paperwork, explaining every detail, answering every question. He gave Robert business cards for a financial advisor and an accountant, people who could help him manage his new resources wisely. One more thing, Mr. Morrison said as their meeting concluded. Mrs. Mitchell wanted you to know that she didn't do this to change who you are. She hoped you would continue being the same kind, generous person you've always been. She believed that people like you make the world better simply by existing. Robert nodded, wiping his eyes again. I don't know what to say. Thank you doesn't seem like enough. Mrs. Mitchell wouldn't have wanted thanks. She'd have wanted you to be happy and to help others when you can. That would be thanks enough for her. Robert left the law firm in a daze. He walked down the busy street, people rushing past him in every direction, everyone caught up in their own lives. Just this morning he'd been one of them, worried about bills and rent and making ends meet. Now everything had changed. He sat on a bench in a small park nearby, just needing a moment to breathe and think. A homeless man approached him asking for spare change. Without thinking, Robert pulled out his wallet and handed the man a $20 bill. God bless you, the man said, his eyes wide with surprise. You too, Robert replied softly. He sat there for a long time, watching the city move around him. He thought about Catherine, about her kindness and her wisdom. She'd seen something in him that he'd never seen in himself. She'd believed he deserved this chance at a better life. Robert made a decision right then. He wouldn't let this money change who he was. He'd continue to help people, to be kind, to do the right thing. But now he'd have the security to do even more. He wouldn't have to worry about picking up extra shifts or stretching every dollar. He could focus on being there for Lisa, for his community, for anyone who needed help. The weight that had sat on his shoulders for so many years suddenly lifted. For the first time in longer than he could remember, Robert felt something he hadn't felt in a very long time. He felt hope, real, genuine hope for the future. And as he sat on that park bench watching the afternoon sun break through the clouds, Robert smiled. Not because of the money or the house, but because Catherine had reminded him that goodness still mattered in this world. That kindness still had value. That one person really could make a difference. He would honor her memory by continuing to be that person, every single day for the rest of his life. 6 months had passed since that life-changing meeting at the law firm. Robert stood in the living room of his new home, watching through the window as Lisa pulled into the driveway. She'd just finished her shift at the hospital where she was doing her nursing clinical rotations. Thanks to Catherine's gift, she'd been able to quit her coffee shop job and focus entirely on her studies. Her grades had never been better, and the stress that used to cloud her face had been replaced with genuine joy. The house was everything Robert had never dared to dream of. 3 bedrooms, a small backyard with a garden, a kitchen with appliances that actually worked properly. But more than the physical space, it represented security. For the first time in his adult life, Robert wasn't worried about making rent or choosing between groceries and utilities. "Hey, Dad," Lisa called out as she came through the front door. "You're home early." "Took the afternoon off," Robert replied with a smile. "Had some things to take care of." What he didn't tell her yet was that he'd spent the afternoon at City Hall, filing paperwork for something that had been growing in his heart for months. Something that would honor Catherine's memory in a way he hoped would make her proud. Lisa kicked off her shoes and collapsed onto the couch. "These 12-hour shifts are no joke. But I love it, Dad. I actually love going to clinical. Is that weird?" "Not at all, sweetheart. It means you're exactly where you're supposed to be," Robert said, sitting down beside her. "How was your day?" "Amazing. I got to assist with an elderly patient who was recovering from a fall. Reminded me of Catherine, actually. I kept thinking about how one person's kindness changed our entire lives. That was the opening Robert had been waiting for. Speaking of which, I have something to tell you. I've been working on a project for the past few months." Lisa sat up, curious. "What kind of project?" "I've started a foundation," Robert said, pulling out a folder of documents. "It's called the Catherine Mitchell Kindness Fund. It provides scholarships to children of service workers. Security guards, janitors, retail employees, cafeteria workers, people like that. Kids whose parents work hard but struggle to afford college." Lisa's eyes widened as she looked through the papers. "Dad, this is incredible. How much are you giving?" "I've set aside $50,000 from what Catherine left me. It'll be invested, and the returns will fund multiple scholarships every year. The first 5 recipients were just selected. They'll each get $10,000 toward their education." Tears filled Lisa's eyes. She would have loved this. "I hope so," Robert said softly. "But that's not all. I've also been volunteering at the Meadowbrook Senior Center 3 days a week. I help the residents with errands, take them to appointments, just spend time with them. So many of them are lonely, Lisa. Just like Catherine was." "You're still working at the mall though, right?" Lisa asked. "Part-time now. Reduced my hours to 30 a week. Gave me time for the volunteering and to get the foundation set up." Robert paused, then added, "The mall management actually promoted me to senior security supervisor. Better pay, better benefits. They said it was because I'd always gone above and beyond even before I had to." The truth was, Robert could have quit his job entirely. The money Catherine left him, combined with the house being paid off, meant he didn't need to work at all. But work had never just been about money for Robert. It was about purpose, about helping people, about being part of a community. Over the next few weeks, Robert's story began to spread. A local newspaper reporter had heard about the scholarship fund and wanted to do a story. Robert initially refused, uncomfortable with the attention. But Lisa convinced him that sharing his story might inspire others. "Dad, if people hear about what Catherine did and how you're paying it forward, maybe it'll encourage them to help others too." Isn't that what she would have wanted? So Robert agreed to the interview. He sat down with the reporter at a small cafe and told the whole story. About helping Catherine on that rainy day, about her passing, about the incredible gift she'd left him, and about his decision to honor her memory through the foundation. The article came out on a Sunday. By Monday morning, Robert's phone wouldn't stop ringing. People from all over the city wanted to contribute to the scholarship fund. Local businesses offered donations. Teachers nominated deserving students. The story had touched something deep in people's hearts. One woman called to say she'd been inspired to volunteer at a nursing home. A young man said he'd started helping his elderly neighbor with grocery shopping. A group of teenagers organized a fundraiser for the scholarship fund at their high school. "You see," Lisa said, reading through the emails and messages that kept pouring in. "This is bigger than just the scholarships, Dad. You're reminding people that kindness matters." Robert was overwhelmed by the response, but he stayed grounded. He personally reviewed every scholarship application, reading about each student's dreams and their family's struggles. He saw himself in their stories. remembered what it felt like to work so hard and still barely make ends meet. One application particularly moved him. It was from the daughter of Vincent, his friend the janitor from the mall. Robert had no idea Vincent's granddaughter was applying for college. When he saw her application, her excellent grades despite working 2 part-time jobs, her dream of becoming a teacher, he knew immediately she deserved one of the scholarships. The day they announced the first group of recipients, Robert invited them all to meet at the community center. 5 young people, all from working-class families, all with dreams bigger than their bank accounts. He shook each of their hands and told them the same thing. This money comes with only one condition. When you're successful, when you've built the life you're dreaming of, remember where you came from. Help someone else the way you're being helped today. That's how we change the world. One act of kindness at a time. Vincent's granddaughter, Rachel, hugged Robert with tears streaming down her face. My grandpa talks about you all the time. He says you're the best person he knows. Now I understand why. That evening, Robert drove to the cemetery where Catherine was buried. He'd been visiting her grave regularly, updating her on everything that was happening even though he knew she couldn't hear him. Or maybe she could. He liked to think so. He placed fresh flowers on her headstone and sat down on the grass beside it. The foundation is up and running, Catherine. We've helped 5 students so far, and with all the donations coming in, we'll be able to help many more. People are being kinder to each other. Your gift didn't just change my life. It started a ripple effect that's touching hundreds of people. The wind rustled through the trees and Robert smiled. Lisa is doing amazing. She's going to be an incredible nurse. She wants to work in geriatric care, helping elderly patients. Says you inspired her. I think you'd really like the woman she's becoming. He sat there quietly for a while, watching the sun begin to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. I want you to know that I haven't forgotten the lesson you taught me. You showed me that goodness still exists in this world, that one person really can make a difference. You didn't just give me money, Catherine. You gave me proof that kindness matters, that it has real value, that it can change lives. Robert stood up slowly, his hand resting on her headstone for a moment. I promise you, I'll keep being that person. The person who stops to help. The person who sees others and cares about their struggles. And I'll teach others to do the same. Your legacy isn't just the money you left behind. It's the kindness you inspired in everyone who hears this story. As Robert walked back to his car, he passed a young mother struggling with a stroller and several shopping bags. Without hesitation, he stopped. Can I help you with those bags? The woman looked surprised but grateful. Oh, that would be wonderful. Thank you so much. Robert carried her bags to her car, helped her load them into the trunk, and wished her a good evening. As he drove away, he saw her in his rearview mirror, smiling and waving. It was a small moment, barely worth remembering. Just a few minutes of helping someone who needed it. But Robert knew better now. He knew that small moments could change everything. One afternoon, helping a woman in a wheelchair had transformed his entire life. And maybe, just maybe, helping that young mother today would plant a seed of kindness that would grow into something beautiful. Maybe she'd remember this moment the next time she saw someone struggling. Maybe she'd stop to help, and maybe the person she helped would help someone else. That's how it worked. That's how Catherine's legacy would live on forever. Not through buildings with her name on them or monuments in her honor, but through simple acts of human kindness, multiplying and spreading like ripples in a pond. Robert drove home as the sun set behind him, feeling more content than he'd ever felt in his life. Not because of the house or the money or the security, but because he'd discovered his true purpose. He was living proof that goodness gets rewarded, that kindness matters, that one person can make a difference, and every single day he would continue to be that person. For Catherine, for Lisa, for everyone who needed help and everyone who needed hope. That was Robert's promise, and it was a promise he intended to keep for the rest of his life.